You know the moment when her energy changes, but her words stay the same. When she says, "I'm just tired," but you feel her slipping through your hands, and you pretend not to notice, because noticing means it's real. You scroll through old messages, looking for a version of her that still wants you. You replay every conversation, trying to find the mistake you made. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a mirror. She didn't abandon you. She exposed you to the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. This isn't about getting her back. It's about getting you back. The man beneath the overthinking, beneath the waiting, beneath the version of yourself that only felt whole when she approved of you. Breakups don't just break your heart. They break your illusion. And that pain you feel, it's not just about losing her, it's about facing the part of yourself that tied your worth to being wanted. In this video, we're not chasing the past, we're meeting the present and learning to stand in it, clear, grounded, unshaken. Comment, I don't chase what walked away. Number 1, attraction isn't approval, it's alignment. You thought she saw your worth, but she only saw her reflection in you. Have you ever sat alone in the aftermath when the echo of her absence is louder than her presence ever was? That quiet ache that says, "Why wasn't I enough?" You weren't chasing love, you were chasing validation. Her gaze felt like proof. Her body felt like approval. Her yes made you feel real. But let's get honest, man. You believed her desire confirmed your masculinity, that her attention certified your value. And so, when she left, or lost interest, it wasn't just heartbreak. It was an identity crisis, a collapse of the self you had built around being chosen. But here's the truth you never learned. Attraction isn't a certificate of your worth. It's not a prize you win by becoming more, doing more, being more. Attraction is alignment, not achievement, not reward. You could be the most emotionally available, grounded, loyal version of yourself and still not be right for her. Still not match the emotional wavelength she's tuned to, still not awaken the version of herself she wants to be with, because attraction is chemistry, not character. But you were raised to think if you were good enough, if you checked enough boxes, if you played the game the right way, she'd stay. But love isn't kept by effort, it's kept by resonance. Two frequencies meeting in silence and saying, "I know you." But when the resonance is missing, no amount of approval seeking will save it. You'll contort, perform, and exhaust yourself. For someone who isn't rejecting you, she's rejecting what you represent. Your rhythm doesn't dance with hers. Your depth doesn't echo in her soul. And yet, you made it personal. You turned misalignment into shame. You said to yourself, "If I were just more of a man, she'd still be here." No, that's not truth. That's ego, drowning in illusion. The Stoics taught us to accept what is, not what we wish it to be. You weren't meant to be enough. For her, you were meant to be you, fully, honestly, without distortion. And sometimes being fully you means you don't align with her wounds, her path, her phase of life. That's not rejection, that's redirection. That's life stepping in and saying, "You're not supposed to fit here." But you fought it. You saw the absence of her desire as proof of your failure. You didn't fail, you didn't fall short, you simply weren't aligned. And that's not a curse, that's clarity. So breathe, brother. You weren't unloved. You were misunderstood. You weren't unwanted. You were misaligned. And maybe, just maybe, life saved you from wasting your soul on someone who could never feel it. She didn't choose better. She chose different, and that's not your failure, it's your freedom. Number 2, her silence was an answer. You weren't waiting for her text. You were waiting for a lie that would let you stay. You know that feeling, that hollow space between checking your phone and checking it again. Not because you missed a notification, but because you missed who you were when she used to care. You stared at the read receipts like they held secrets, scrolled back through old messages, searching for something. A sign, a clue, a code you could crack to bring her back. But let me say something that may sting a little. You weren't confused. You just didn't want to face what her silence already screamed. You told yourself she was busy, that she needed space, that she'd come around when things calmed down, and maybe you even convinced yourself that giving her time was love, that your patience made you strong. But deep down, you weren't being patient. You were being afraid to accept that the connection had flatlined, that the woman who once lit up when she saw your name now scrolls past it like it's nothing. Her silence wasn't a mystery. It wasn't sacred. It wasn't layered with deeper meaning. It was simple. She's no longer emotionally invested. She's already gone, mentally, emotionally, soulfully, even if her number's still in your phone. And what you thought was a quiet phase was actually the full story. Her silence was the message. But we, as men, struggle to accept that kind of quiet. We want clear answers. We want a final goodbye, a reason, a closing door. But not everyone gives that. Not everyone is brave enough to speak the truth. So they let silence do the talking. And in your need for closure, you clung to false hope like it was your last breath, because that hope kept the pain from fully landing. It gave you just enough cushion to delay the fall. But every day you waited, every time you replayed her last words, you weren't healing. You were stalling, because healing doesn't begin with time. It begins with truth, and the truth is this. Uncertainty isn't mystery. It's avoidance in disguise. We romanticize the unknown. We act like maybe, just maybe, there's still a chance. But often, the uncertainty you feel isn't because something's unsaid. It's because you already know and you don't want to admit it. The Stoics said, if something causes you suffering, examine it, and you'll find that it's your judgment, not the thing itself. You're not suffering because she's gone. You're suffering because you won't let go, because you believe silence still owes you something. It doesn't. Silence is the closure. Silence is the truth. And maybe it hurts. But it also sets you free. Free from trying, free from hoping, free from chasing someone who's no longer facing you. Her silence isn't a puzzle, it's a period. It's the end of a sentence you kept trying to rewrite. So breathe. Stop waiting for a message that's never coming. You don't need her to tell you it's over. You just need to stop pretending it isn't. Her silence was an answer, one louder than any words she ever spoke. Number 3, you loved her potential, not her pattern. You weren't loving her, you were loving the idea of who she might one day become. Be honest with yourself for a moment, not with the version of you that tries to stay strong, not with the voice that justifies her every mistake, but with the quiet part of you, the part that saw the red flags and stayed anyway, the part that said, she'll grow out of this, the part that whispered, she just needs time. You weren't in love with who she was. You were in love with who she might be. One day, eventually, maybe, you fell for the woman in your imagination, the version of her who listened better, loved deeper, fought less, cared more. And that version She never existed outside of your hope. You didn't fall for her reality. You fell for your own vision of what her potential looked like when it finally arrived. But here's the quiet tragedy. It never did. And every time she let you down, every time she snapped or pulled away or made you feel small, you didn't hold her accountable. You held yourself hostage. You thought, if I was more patient, she'd change. If I loved her better, she'd rise into the woman I see in her. If I could just hold on a little longer, she'd finally become who I believed she could be. But that wasn't love. That was self-abandonment dressed as loyalty. And that belief, that dangerous romanticized belief, kept you stuck. Because you weren't dating the present. You were clinging to the future. To the idea of, to the someday version, the healed version, the version who never arrived. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance, the mental tug-of-war between what we see and what we want to see. You were trapped in that war, seeing the patterns clearly, but choosing to believe the potential louder. She showed you who she was, consistently, repeatedly, undeniably. But you kept rewriting the story. You made excuses for the distance, for the mood swings, for the blame, the silence, the guilt. You told yourself it was temporary, that growth was just around the corner, that this time it would be different, but it never was, because she wasn't trying to grow. She wasn't trying to meet you where you stood. She was exactly who she wanted to be. Even if that person never chose you properly. A Stoic doesn't cling to potential. He sees the pattern, he sees the truth, and he accepts it, not with resentment but with clarity. You don't get to love someone for who they might become. You only get to love who they are, here, now, raw and unfiltered. And if that version doesn't honor you, you walk. You don't wait. You don't mold. You don't bleed yourself dry hoping one day she'll rise into the vision you painted of her in your loneliness. Because that isn't hope. That's delusion. And you don't deserve to suffer in a loop you mistook for loyalty. You kept giving her chances, not because she earned them, but because your fantasy kept you hooked. You stayed because you saw potential, but potential doesn't hurt you. Patterns do, and hers were clear. If only you'd stopped rewriting them with every burst of affection that followed her chaos. So now here's the shift. You didn't fall for her. You fell for the possibility of her. You loved the light she could have become, but kept burning in the fire she never left. And now, it's time to return to yourself, to stop grieving the future, to stop romanticizing the maybes, and to start honoring the man you've become through it all. You weren't loving her. You were loving the hope that one day she'd finally become someone who deserved you. That day never came, and that's not your failure, it's your freedom. Number 4, rejection isn't punishment, it's precision. It didn't break you, it carved you free. There's a moment after the breakup when the silence settles in and the weight of her absence feels like a verdict, a ruling passed down from someone you trusted, that you weren't good enough to stay for. You don't say it out loud, but it lingers in the background. Why wasn't I worth keeping? You play back every memory like a courtroom transcript, searching for the evidence, trying to find the exact moment when it all started to unravel. Was it when you said too much or not enough? When you cared too deeply or didn't show it fast enough? But brother, here's what no one told you when you were kneeling in the rubble. Rejection isn't a punishment, it's precision. It's life stepping in like a quiet surgeon, cutting away what doesn't belong to the man you're becoming. She didn't leave to punish you. She left because her role in your story was finished. and she couldn't go with you to the place you're headed. I know it felt cruel. Like the universe was mocking you, taking something that finally made you feel alive and snatching it away when you were starting to believe in love again. But that wasn't cruelty. That was clarity, disguised as collapse. You see, Stoicism teaches something brutal and freeing. Don't wish for things to happen as you want. Wish for them to happen exactly as they do. Because what happened needed to happen, even if it hurt, even if it ripped the floor out from under you. Your ego called it betrayal. Your heart called it unfair. But your soul, if you sit still long enough, your soul calls it alignment. You were never meant to beg for belonging, never meant to chase someone's half-hearted affection like it was oxygen. But you had to be broken in this exact way to see what you were blind to before. That you were giving your loyalty to someone who never earned it. That you were bending your truth to fit inside a love that was already cracking at the foundation. Rejection feels brutal, but it's also surgical. It's not random. It's not careless. It's an incision. Clean, intentional, cutting you away from the wrong story so you can finally live the right one. You thought this pain meant you failed, but what if it means you're finally ready? Ready to stop pouring your worth into someone else's cup. Ready to build a life that doesn't depend on someone staying. Ready to stop settling for survival, disguised as love. The universe isn't cruel. It's precise. It removes what's misaligned, even when you're not brave enough to do it yourself. So maybe she didn't leave you. Maybe she was removed for your protection, for your evolution. You don't see it now, but one day you will stand at peace, not because you got her back, but because you got yourself back. And you'll look at the pain you swore would break you and you'll say, that wasn't the end of me. That was the start of my freedom. The rejection was brutal, but it was also surgical. Number 5, you were trying to earn what should be given freely. She didn't make you feel invisible. You did that when you handed her the mirror. Tell me the truth. How many times did you try to prove you were worth it? Not just with words, but with your silence, your sacrifices, your softened tone, the way you made yourself smaller. So she'd have more room to feel comfortable. You thought love meant proving, earning, convincing. You tried harder. You listened more. You forgave faster. You swallowed your needs, buried your instincts, held your truth behind your teeth, just to keep her close. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that to be loved, you had to earn it. You thought love was a reward, something handed out in exchange for enough effort, enough goodness, enough manliness, enough self-sacrifice. But real love doesn't come with a price tag. It doesn't ask for your dignity in return for affection. It doesn't make you audition for belonging, because when someone truly sees you, you don't have to prove anything. But she didn't see you. Not really. She saw the version of you that made her feel safe, the version that pleased her, the one that wouldn't challenge her or require her to grow. And you mistook that comfort for connection, so you worked harder. You thought, if I just do a little more, maybe she'll finally choose me. But the truth, if she doesn't see your value from the start, she never will. Not because you lack value, but because her eyes aren't built to recognize it. You spent so long trying to earn what should be given freely. Unconditional acceptance, shared effort, emotional presence. But love built on convincing is a performance, not a connection. And you weren't meant to be an actor in your own relationship. You were taught, maybe by your father, maybe by the world, that a good man provides, protects, puts others first, and there's honor in that. but not when it becomes self-erasure. Not when your worth gets tied to what you can give instead of who you are. Stoicism reminds us, he who seeks to please others loses himself. You lost yourself in her approval, in her moods, in her validation, like a man clinging to a rope that's already been cut. You kept asking, what more can I do? But the better question was, why do I believe I have to do more to be loved? Let that question sit with you, because love, true love, doesn't ask for more. It meets you where you already stand. It sees you before you've proved anything, and it stays. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. If you have to convince her, then you're not being loved. You're being tolerated, and that's not the same thing. That's survival. That's scarcity. That's you chasing. A feeling that was never yours to chase. So stop running. Stop trying to impress someone who didn't even bother to study your soul. Let her go, not because you weren't enough, but because she wasn't capable of receiving enough. You weren't too much. You were simply too deep for someone swimming in shallow waters. If you have to convince her, it was never yours to begin with. Number 6, you chased her because you didn't know yourself. She didn't complete you. She distracted you from the emptiness you refused to face. Be honest. Was it ever really about her, or was it about how you felt when she looked at you? Like you mattered? When her affection drowned out the noise inside your chest, when her presence gave you a break from the voice in your head that asked, "Am I enough?" She didn't heal you. She numbed you, and the chase, it wasn't a pursuit of love. It was a sprint away from loneliness, not the kind where you're alone in a room, but the deeper kind, the kind where you're alone inside yourself. Where you haven't met the man staring back at you in the mirror, where you've built your identity around being needed, but not known. You saw her as salvation, a mirror that could finally reflect something beautiful back to you, something you couldn't find in yourself. So you gave everything, your time, your attention, your peace. And when she pulled away, you chased harder, because her absence didn't just feel like loss. It felt like confirmation. Confirmation that you weren't enough, that without her eyes on you, you didn't exist in the way you needed to. You weren't in love. You were in escape. Escape from the weight of your own silence. Escape from the quiet ache that says, I don't really know who I am unless someone's choosing me. And that's the trap. Because when you don't know yourself, you attach your identity to how someone else sees you. And the moment they stop looking, you collapse. So you cling. You chase, not because of love, but because of fear. Fear that without her attention, you'll disappear. Fear that without her validation, you'll be nothing more than the questions you've avoided your entire life. But here's what the Stoics understood. A man's peace cannot depend on anything he does not control. Not money, not praise, not a woman's affection, especially not that. Because anything you chase to escape yourself will eventually become the very thing that exposes you. And that's what she did. She didn't reject you. She revealed you. She showed you the hollow places you hadn't yet filled. The insecurities you'd buried under being the good man. The cracks in your foundation that couldn't hold a relationship because they'd never been seen, let alone healed. So, maybe she did you a favor. Maybe her absence isn't a punishment, but a prompt. A prompt to meet yourself alone, without the distraction of her gaze, to ask, who am I when no one's choosing me? And if the answer is, I don't know, that's where your work begins, because a man who knows himself doesn't beg for recognition, doesn't chase what walks away, doesn't crumble when affection leaves the room. He becomes the kind of man who can sit in silence and not fear it, because he's made peace with what he finds there. When you stop running from yourself, you stop chasing others to fill the void. And that's when you find your power. That's when you become undeniable. So let her go, not because she wasn't important, but because her leaving gave you the gift of seeing your own emptiness. And now you get to fill it with you. You weren't in love. You were in escape, but now you're coming home. Number 7, clarity isn't soft, it's severance. The truth didn't break you, it just took away what was never yours. There's a moment right after the storm where everything becomes painfully clear, not soft, not gentle, but sharp, like glass under your feet. It's the moment when the illusion finally dies, when all the justifications, all the hope, all the stories you told yourself crumble into dust, and you're left standing in the wreckage of a reality you never wanted to admit. That moment is called clarity. It doesn't arrive with a warm hand on your back. It doesn't come wrapped in comfort. It comes with a blade, and it cuts through the fantasy, cuts through the codependence, cuts through every part of you that believed if you just loved harder, waited longer, sacrificed more, she'd come around. But she didn't, and that's not your fault, that's the truth. Clarity isn't poetic, it's surgical, it severs, it doesn't ask permission, it doesn't wait until you're ready. It arrives, in silence, in solitude, in sleepless nights. And it says, look, see it, all of it, the reality, the pattern, the truth you avoided. And that truth, it doesn't whisper, it doesn't soothe, it strips away the lies you needed to survive the relationship, strips away the hope that was keeping you stuck, strips away the man you pretended to be to hold something together that was already falling apart. And when that happens, you think you're breaking, but you're not. You're becoming. This is the part no one talks about, how clarity feels like cruelty, because it doesn't coddle. It reveals, it shows you exactly where you betrayed yourself to avoid being abandoned. It shows you how long you've been negotiating your worth for crumbs of connection. It shows you the version of you that needed her to feel whole, and how that version no longer fits the man you're becoming, because clarity is the death of illusions, and every illusion must die so something real can be born. The Stoics understood this. They taught that we must welcome discomfort, not as punishment, but as purification. The pain isn't the enemy, it's the scalpel. It's what removes the diseased parts of your story, the lies, the fantasies, the fears that kept you chasing the very thing that was killing you. And when that cut is done, you feel exposed, raw, like everything familiar has been stripped away, because it has. But what's left is you, the real you, not the one she wanted, not the one who begged, not the one who believed love had to be earned through suffering. Just you, clear-eyed, calm, quiet, no longer reacting to the chaos, but finally responding to the truth. That's what clarity gives you, not comfort but control, not reassurance but resilience. So let it cut. Let it sever every piece of you that was built on need, on fantasy, on fear. Let it hurt, because only through that hurt can you rise. You're not ruined, you're not broken, you're just finally awake. Clarity didn't ruin you. It revealed you. You've been through the fire, but not to be destroyed, to be refined. Because the man who sat in silence, aching for answers, he isn't the man who's listening now. You've outgrown the fantasy. You've shed the need to be needed. And for the first time, you're not reaching back. You're standing still and realizing that stillness is strength. You've learned that rejection isn't proof of your inadequacy. It's the spotlight that revealed your blind spots. You didn't lose her. You lost the version of yourself that thought you couldn't live without her. And that is power, because now you don't need to chase. You don't need to prove. You don't need to be seen to feel real. You've made peace your priority. And in that peace, you've remembered who you are. Not because someone reflected it back to you, but because you finally turned inward and saw the man you've been becoming all along. A man who no longer reacts, but responds, who no longer waits, but walks, who no longer begs, but builds. So let her go, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. And let yourself rise, not out of vengeance, but out of alignment. You don't need her back. You don't even need closure, because the version of you that needed her no longer exists. Comment: I am not who I used to be. Subscribe if you're walking away. In silence, not to prove a point, but to protect your peace.